Welcome to the Growler, a Houday podcast hosted by Paul Dana and other bald friends like Mo Egger, Dave Nanametz, home of all your Bengals breaks, takes. Welcome to the Growler.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of Balls Don't Lie. Paul Dana Jr., Jay Morrison are here with you on a Tuesday. Finally back, potentially better rested. Jay,
Definitely
staring
better
at a brand new, beautiful, just gorgeous MacBook Pro right now, and very happy to say that I am after a diabolical Sunday night in LA. But that's all right. We persevered. We made it through, and eventually we effing finished and made it to get all the feeds working and everything after my laptop fried post game.
How beautiful is the laptop? Did the purchase come from your account, or did the New York Times send that to you?
That came from mine. There will be a separate New York Times computer that will be coming my way here soon. But it was time to go big, bright, and Growler beautiful. I wanted a high powered machine to fuel the content, and we've got that now. Now a little thing that I take on my road that's on the road that's light, and that I can do all the New York Times business on. Will be. I'll have that as well. So I'm going to be double. No, it's time. It's time.
Yeah, I bought a brand new one after I left PFN. It's a great feeling to have a super fast machine, and I'm sure it'll be loaded down and slow before we know it. But right now we are chugging along at breakneck speed.
Oh yes, it's good. It's good to not think that the entire thing could end immediately, which is. Yeah, I'm still a little scarred. From the other night, but hey, we made it, and thanks everybody for hanging in there as we kind of battled through some of the issues and got everything up for you. It took a little later than it normally does, but we got you there. So thanks everybody for that. We should be all good now. We're going to bring Mo in here momentarily. We're going to talk about, obviously there's a ton of fallout right now from what's going on with this team and trying to analyze it. We are recording this before a weird schedule this week, bye week. So we're going to have Zach Taylor and coordinators this afternoon. So we're recording before that. There may be more news that comes out of that. We'll get more for you as we go through the week. And then we'll be heading into our bye week for some special stuff that we're going to have coming your way. But so not a ton of news right now. It looks like DJ Turner's probably going to be out for the year. He's looking at a second opinion right now, but clavicle, I think we kind of saw that coming. When we first heard that news after the game. Unfortunate for him, obviously, was maybe having his best run of play in that game. Is it 3 PBUs, was starting to make some plays, and it seemed like there was a chance there. But yeah, it looks like his season will end. Outside of that, there's a lot of other stuff to get to. Before I do that, I want to remind everybody on Thursday at 7:00, we're going to be doing our live show, My Favorite Game, Todd Frazier, talking about the 2015 Home Run Derby with myself, Jim Day, and C. Trent. We're going to be down there at BetMGM, Nation Kitchen and Bar, at the Banks, all the deals we do for the live show, everything like that, $3 Cincy Lights, the appetizer specials. You can reserve a table for that at nationkitchenandbar.com. Reserve a table for any big event that you have. You want to watch games, whatever. Make sure you go down there, check that out. We hope to see you on Thursday. It's going to be a ton of fun. Panel starts at 7:00. We'll be re-airing the Derby from 5 to 7 before that, but panel starts at 7:00, and Todd's going to do a meet and greet after that. So come on down, meet Todd Frazier, hear us talk about the 2015 Home Run Derby. Okay. Let's talk about one-score games, and we'll bring Mo in here in the middle of this. This is the story of the season, is the unbelievable way that they continue to lose these games. They are 1-6 in one-score games this year, each one seemingly worse than the previous. That's a 143 winning percentage, which is not good. Only a Jacksonville right there with them, but those are the worst in football. The previous 3 years, Jay, the Bengals were 14-12 in one-score games, and if you throw in the playoffs, that number is even better. Obviously, they've had some success in one-score games in the playoff. The Steelers that ranks 14th in the league, so middle, above average, whatever. Steelers are first at 24-9. Tomlin, that's the Tomlin signature, right? Like they play a style that wins a lot of those types of games. The most one-score losses in a single season is 9 in the last 20 years. I went back 20 years. That's enough. I'm not going back. We don't need to go back to the 70s. Last 20 years, 9. That's happened 11 times. There's no Bengals season that has done that. But the worst winning percentage in one-score games in the last 10 years actually is kind of technically owned by the Bengals. The 2019 Bengals, people may remember, were 0-8 in one-score games that year. It was the most games without a win in that span. So this team being 1-6, they can ascend to some record territory here. I mean, this is stuff that we haven't seen. Also very reminiscent of the 2010 Bengals, a season that I've referenced a few times, that felt very familiar. A lot of big names, a lot of big numbers being put up offensively, and just finding ways to lose every week. That team went 2-8 in one-score games with T.O. and Chad, and then at the end of Carson. The interesting thing about this is, Jay, I mean, how sustainable how correlative is this stuff? Is this a inherent problem, right? Is this something that rolls over year to year, or is this something that happens and you just say, oh, crazy game with this football, right? I mean, how do you view this? I think is a big question that this organization is going to have to answer going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of thought of it as bad luck or good luck. I mean, there is you have to be a good team to win a bunch of one-score games, and you're probably not a great team if you're losing a bunch of them. But it seems like the law of averages kind of averages out, and that's not been the case. I went and I looked at what the 11 teams that you had that have had 9 one-score losses in a season, how they do the following year. Only 3 of those 11 had winning records. The best was the Vikings. They had 9 one-score losses in 2011. They came back in 2012. They went 10-6. They were a wild card. They lost in the first round. Nobody else made the playoffs. The Texans went from 9 one-score losses to 9-7 the following year. And the Chargers, actually, the Chargers had 9 one-score losses in 15 and 16. And in 16, they were 9-7, despite all the, wait, that can't be right. No, the following year they were 9-7. So in 2017, after back-to-back seasons with 9 one-score losses, they finally put it together. But it's only 9-7. So it's to expect a big turnaround next year. If the Bengals get to 9, I don't know that it's there. If you go by the data.
Bill, I reached out to a few analytics people about this. Just the correlative nature of that, and a lot of people pointed me to Bill Barnwell basically wrote a thesis on this at Grantland, and essentially stated that there is none. Was kind of his point. He said this was kind of a quick synopsis of what he said. He said, teams are incredibly inconsistent from year to year when it comes to winning games that are decided by 1 touchdown or less. There's no formula here. Just count up each team's number of games that were decided by 1 touchdown or less, check their winning percentage, and then see if they're similarly good or bad the following season. When you do, we bet you'll find that it's essentially random. He said, why as they've mentioned before, there's a few close games per year. It isn't enough to draw any conclusions. And the Bengals side of this kind of bears some of that out too. The fact that it's been something that they've generally been good at year over year, and then all of a sudden you have a year where this happens. And so, we heard Jamar Chase, right? And I asked him specifically about, look, finishing. What does that mean? Finish. What does that mean? And that's when he went off on coaching, right? The coaches, I play football. I'm on the field. Coaches call the plays, ask Zach. And so the suggestion that some of the plays and the play calling are playing a role in them losing all of these close games. Do we buy that? That becomes part of the question that you start to ask. Do you buy that, Jay?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, all one-score games are not equal. You look at, okay, Cleveland was a one-score game, but the Bengals had that in control, and then Cleveland goes down and makes it a one-score game late. Sunday night was a one-score game, but the Bengals were down by 21 points in that game. It was an amazing comeback, but some one-score games stay one score throughout the 60 minutes, and others are all over the place. So it's just where it lands, where it ends. I think there is something to learning how to win those close games, but I don't know that it's an epidemic where there's an indictment needed on. It's just these games there's not a common theme in them beyond the point total being 8 or less, but you get to 8 or less in so many different ways.
No question. Let's flip that question forward and bring in our good friend and yours, Mo Egger. All right, now bringing in Mo Egger. I was going to have a question. I was going to start really come in hard, come in hot. We're on a topic about one-score games and who's responsible for their losses. But yet again, I have to ask, you're in your car. Where the hell are you?
I'm in the parking lot of Graders.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Now you're Graders worthy indeed. Look at you go.
I'm in the parking lot of Graders. Is this considered Clifton that I'm in?
You tell us.
Is this Gilbert?
I don't know. You're yeah.
So I was at NKU this morning, and then I had to go to UC. And then I realized when I got to UC, I left my bag at NKU. So I had like my original like microphone and all that stuff in the bag, left it at NKU. So I'll do this, make a pit stop here at Graders, go get my bag, and then go back to UC. This is the life I lead.
Yeah, you know what? But you're making the best of it, and we've learned all about that. You got to find your way through. You've got to figure out. You got to find a way to F and finish, and you are here finishing for us, and we certainly appreciate that. I will, and let me know. I mean, look, the fine folks at Graders, they're happy to help you if there's anything. That if you need to take a break to go in and like grab another coffee, or if you just want to go get some morning ice cream, you let us know. Okay.
They're going to serve me some baked goods as soon as in fact, had I really thought this out, I would have done it from inside there, but I didn't want to.
It would have been a great opportunity. It would have been a great opportunity. I want to pose to you the same question that I just posed to Jay. The Bengals are not finishing these close games. They are finding ways to lose. Who's responsible for that? We heard Jamar Chase. We know Jamar Chase started bringing up at the idea of that. Where do you land on? Do you buy that it is the coaches, that it's on them to finish these games?
No, not really. No, I mean, I think there are issues that everybody could have with how the team is coached. I just don't think the team is good enough. And I know that sounds like, gee, no kidding, Mo, they're 4-7, but you guys talked about this in the walkout at 4:00 in the morning. By the way, Jay looked really good for 4 a.m.
Yeah, I think Jay always just looks good. I think that's just shows you can't shake him. He does some of his best work at 4 a.m. over the course of his life, I think.
Yeah, I do not.
I rarely see 4 a.m. sober, so I think that's why I look so good at that time.
We've reached the point of the season where I think it's pretty firmly established what you are. This team's not good enough. Yeah. They're a train wreck on defense. They've got a special teams issue, at least one. And offensively, while they're very proficient and explosive, there are issues there that have continued to manifest themselves throughout the course of the season. Is the coaching complicit in that? Sure. I think it's, I think 6 years in, it's completely fair for us all to take a step back and examine whether or not this team has gone as far as it's going to go with Zach Taylor's leadership. But when I think of the issues that have plagued this team throughout the course of the season, I just don't think the team is good enough. And is that mainly a reflection of the coaching staff? I don't think so. I don't think so. Now, we've talked about situational football and Zach Taylor. My colleague Tony Pike, I think, did a brilliant job of kind of outlining his major rub with a play toward the end of the game, which, you might say speaks to inadequacies when it comes to situational football and coaching in those situations. But it's not a good enough roster. It's not a good enough team, and good enough teams tend not to finish. Teams that aren't experienced in winning, and I know the Bengals with this core group have won some, but I guess they're just not good enough at winning come winning time, so to speak. I just don't think the team is good enough, and I think 11 games is enough of a sample size for us to arrive at that conclusion.
I mean, there are play calls that you can question. The one, Tony, we're taking Jamar off the field on second down. You go back to the Baltimore game and how they kind of turtled up and played for the field goal instead of being aggressive. But you're right. So much of that, it comes down to the players making plays. Look at the play before, the one that was Tony was upset about, that Burrow missing that deep ball to Chase. That happens so rarely between those two, and that's players not making plays when they need it the most. And it's hard to hold it against him when he's made so many other incredible plays to get him to that position. But and then the other thing too, and what I was kind of mentioning before you came on, is that these games are all different. Is it a matter of, do you have a lead in a tight game and you give it up at the end, or are you always playing from behind in these one-score games and you just can't get there and get it to even or take the lead? There's so many different elements that go into making a one-score game, and there's so many elements into how you win it. And I don't know that you can point the finger at one element. Is it coaching, players, opponents, whatever it is? These things, they're just all so different.
Yeah, I think when you have a season like this, everybody's complicit. But let's say McPherson makes one of those kicks and the Bengals get a stop, and that last drive that we're referring to ends up being one where they grind out the clock and win the game. Are we talking about play calling then? Like the margin of victory and defeat is so slim, but so is the difference between us saying really nice things about the coaching staff and not so nice things about the coaching staff and play calling and stuff. An offensive line that has a lot of guys they've invested in. These aren't randos. These aren't low-round draft choices. These are players the Bengals have either prioritized in free agency or prioritized in the draft, or in Cordell Volson's case, I guess, been a part of the team now for a while, and yet Joe Burrow is taking 1 billion hits. Is that Zach Taylor's fault? They've been unable to connect on a handful of plays when the games have been hanging in the balance that have seemingly been there. Is that the play calling's fault, or is it the play execution fault? Well, the play execution is the part that the players are responsible for. Now, I think, and you guys talked about this yesterday as well, they got the 3 and out to start the game on defense, and then it kind of felt like they had no answer for the Chargers. Is that a coaching thing? Yeah, it might be. But at the end of the day, it's not a good defense, and there's not enough players who are having good seasons, and guys that I think everybody was really on board with coming into the season have just not worked out. Cam Taylor-Britt being a primary example. I don't think anybody should absolve. If we're doing the whole blame game, if Paul has his wheel, when you're having a season like this, you can look at coaching decisions. You could look at individual play calls. You could look at overarching game plans, but everybody's to blame. I mean, there have been players that we thought were going to contribute on this team that have done next to nothing. There have been holes the front office has just not been able to fill that have turned into gaping holes this season. And sure, there have been, individual play calls that you would like to maybe have back. I guess everything's sort of in play here. But, the sort of grand 30,000-foot theme of the season has been wasting greatness. And so we'll fling it back to Jamar Chase after the game. I saw a guy and I listened to a guy, and I did so with watching Joe Burrow and listening to T. Higgins talk to Dave Lapham on Sunday night. I hear players who are frustrated with their best efforts going for naught. And that's a problem. No matter who you want to pin it on, no matter who you want to blame, that's a problem.
That's that's really where I think I come back to when we start talking about, okay, where do you go with what comes next, right? Because the conversations now are everyone's going to talk about Zach Taylor saying, "Look, I'm not going to have wholesale changes right now when I feel like we're one play away, and every week." And I agree with it. Certainly right now, Like I've kind of said my piece on this a couple of times. I don't think there's anything to be gained by blowing out a coordinator or a head coach at this point in this season. I think there's real conversations that are going to need to be had when this season ends. And I don't know. I don't know that I see a world, and I've said this before, and it's been wrong, but I don't know that I see a world where Lou Anarumo can survive this. I mean, this just feels like, I mean, when you have a first half like that in that situation, I didn't know if the second half would have looked like the first half. I don't know that Lou Anarumo was surviving that game. I mean, because that would have looked like a team that has totally just tuned out their coordinator. They were able to come back, and they did show resiliency, and I give credit for that. I mean, I don't know. Do you, Mo? Do you see a world where Lou Anarumo can survive this when it feels like all your young players and all of your pieces that you're counting on so much to develop, they need a voice? There is no way that this team gets to where it needs to get to defensively if the young players don't start developing, if they don't connect with them. You can't replace all of them. They are not in a place financially with Burrow and what Chase is going to be and everything else to just go out and just spend at every position that has failed them by a young player. That is impossible to do. They have to get the most out of those guys. They probably need a new voice to do that because it's obviously not working. And that's doesn't mean that Lou's not still a great defensive coordinator. The coordinators don't last long because voices need to change. Do you view it that way? Do you feel like it's hard to see a path where you can accept him back as DC again?
It looked and felt like Terrell Austin's last game.
Yeah.
The other night. It's not the first time we've said that this year.
No.
And I think I've asked you either on this podcast or on my show, if Zach Taylor's area of discipline was on defense, would he have taken over play calling?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So what's keeping Lou Anarumo in place is the fact that Zach Taylor's an offensive guy. That doesn't seem like it bodes well for Lou's short-term employment with the Bengals. And I just, we always put things through the filter of what would Joe Burrow say about this? I would imagine if you got Joe to speak truthfully and said, hey, that defense that has cost you guys 7 games where you have averaged over 300 yards passing and 18 touchdowns, those games that the defense is losing for you, we're going to take the defensive coordinator and bring him back. My guess is his reaction to that would look a lot like the reaction to your guys' questions after games.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And so how do you do it? How do you bring him back? And, maybe over the final, maybe what we saw in the second half where the defense did play pretty well enough to give him a chance to win. Maybe that portends this team over the next 6 weeks getting stellar defensive performances, but it doesn't feel like it. It just doesn't feel like it. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we were to, do the thing where wager an amount of money that matters to you on the most likely offseason move, it would be the Bengals swapping out defensive coordinators.
Yeah, but whose call is it going to be? Is it going to be Mike Brown's call because Lou's under contract next year, or is it going to be Zach's call because he knows they need a change? I keep thinking back to you look at what's left on this schedule, and I keep thinking back to the send them home happy Bengals of the 90s. They had these awful years, and then they find something at the end of the year, and there's a chance for that to happen. After the bye, they're playing some really bad offenses, and if you see some progress and you see this turn a little bit, and it happens with DJ Turner on IR and Dax Hill on IR, and I can see a world where they say, okay, let's run it back one more year because we saw some development, even if it's just window dressing. I could see that's how this franchise has always operated.
It's the only path. I mean, all of a sudden, Josh Newton and maybe Cam and Miles Murray, I don't know, any of these young players, really taking off is really that's all he's got, because that's what needs to happen going forward. Anybody can come in and point out the new free agents that they want to build their defense around. Okay. But the thing for Lou is going to be connecting with the young core, is going to be showing that he's capable of developing them. And he's had 2 years with the vast majority of these draft picks that we have highlighted for years now, these 7 guys that he took all in a row, and there's more than that, that have all been top picks, and hardly any of them have truly panned out. He's had 2 years to develop them into real players. And last year was spent saying, oh man, all the mistakes you saw, they're going to pay off next year. Everything you saw happen, all these failures, that's because they're young and they're rookies. You'll see they make mistakes, and next year you're going to see the payoff for that, just like it happened for the Chiefs. And guess what? They suck still. They're still bad. And in fact, they've gotten worse in the case of a lot of them. That is the problem. Like, that is the root of the issue. That's what this is. And that's why I don't see the way out, because you saw it again. We're talking about Cam Taylor, Britt.
Yeah.
Another benching and another game that he's going to be scapegoated, right? I mean, and he deserves it, but it's like, you know, this guy is supposed to be one of the core dudes that you're young getting through to and developing, and you're not. You're not. That's your job. And I think that's where the problem is.
And I feel like with so many of the young players, so many of the defensive players the Bengals have drafted, the narrative has been, these are the sort of players Lou wants. These are the sort of players that fit his image, right? Versatility, etc. These are Lou's guys. Well, if they're Lou's guys and they're not performing well in Lou's defense, then they have to be someone else's guys. But what a stunning fall. I mean, it really is remarkable. It's kind of the nature of the league, I guess. You know, 2 years ago, we were wondering, why doesn't this guy get a legitimate chance to be a head coach? Like, what's it going to take for this guy to be a coach? We went into last year going, you know what? He's been a candidate. He's gotten interviews. Can they have a season this year that really bolsters his bona fides to be a head coach? And now we're ushering him out the door, seemingly with never a chance to be a head coach again. And then it feels like defensive coordinators get recycled at a pretty incredible rate. So my guess is he would have other opportunities elsewhere. But still, what a stunning fall. I mean, 2 years ago, you couldn't talk about the impact of the coaching staff on the team's success without talking about Lou Anarumo. And I think a lot of fans would talk about Lou before they talked about Zach Taylor, because they would say, well, Zach has Joe Burrow, and Lou's doing it maybe a little bit without, one guy carrying him on his shoulders, although he certainly did have some very good players to work with. What a remarkable less than 24-month fall for Lou. And I feel for him, but I think you're right. Look, in 2021, I don't want to say I could have rebuilt that defense, but I could have just thrown money around and said, DJ Reader, let's overpay you, and Trey Hendrickson, let's maybe overpay you. And those decisions and moves worked, and they got Jesse Bates to a point where he was one of the best safeties in the NFL, but they're not going to be able to just throw money blindly at the defense. They're going to have to hit big in the draft. They're going to have to develop those players. They're going to have to get early returns from them. And if Lou hasn't been able to do that with, the last 2 groups of guys that he's had, I don't know that I trust him to do it next year and beyond.
Yeah, 24 months ago, he was a finalist. He was one of the 2 finalists in Arizona, and it felt like, he dodged a bullet by not getting that job, because Arizona's always been such a train wreck of a franchise. Not always, but it's not the best run franchise. And now to see where Lou is at now, stunning, I guess, is the right word, because you had to figure that with all this youth, there was going to be some growing pains, but for it to continue and there be no light at the end of the tunnel for these young guys, I didn't see it coming.
That's the NFL. I mean, look at coordinators around the league. The Bengals are the exception. Year 6. What? There aren't coordinators that do this. What Brian Callahan and Lou Anarumo had under Zach Taylor here does not happen. Almost nowhere does it happen. And maybe they thought they'd found, and I think everybody thought that they had their Spags if he doesn't get a head coach job, right? They got their guy. You get the guy on the defensive side of the ball with a franchise quarterback, and you can get sustainability there, and you can have but everywhere else, like it's churn. It's after year 2, after year 3, it changes. Guys need new voices. Guys get stale because when you know what you do, when you have a year where you're benching everyone and rotating everybody, you're pissing everybody off, and no one cares about listening to you anymore. And they start tuning you out, and you've pissed off half enough people, and everyone's complaining. You need a new voice to bring everybody together on the same page and get everybody back on their P's and Q's, thinking they've got to impress the new guy. That is why the coordinator positions do cycle, and it doesn't. And Lou Anarumo can go do that somewhere else, probably. Like I really don't have a doubt about that. But it's really hard to see when you've seen the type of performances in huge spots this year, and notably the second half against Baltimore and the first half against the Chargers. That 4-quarter stretch was probably the final straw. It just feels that way.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
And so Tony and I were doing the pregame call-in show on Sunday, and we were talking about the issues that the defense has had. And a caller brought up the name Robert Livingston, who's at Colorado right now and enjoying success as a defensive coordinator. And I said on the air, I don't know if I'm the guy that's qualified to say whether or not Robert would be interested in being a DC in the NFL. You know, there's certainly a lot of conjecture that Deion Sanders is going to jump to the NFL, and what does that mean for Robert Livingston? So if they move on from Lou, understanding that they love continuity, I'll ask the caller's question. Could Robert Livingston be in play to be the DC in 2025? It might be a stupid question, but it was one that we got, and so I'll pose it to you guys.
I don't think it's a stupid question. I do think the answer is no. I think that they would be looking for someone more established. I mean, that is a job. You're looking for new voice, and that's the thing. He wouldn't be a new voice. I mean, for one of the biggest problems in that room, he'd be an old voice. But I'll say, I think that they're looking for someone I think you could get a pretty strong dude with skins on the wall when you're going to be the defense coordinator opposite Joe Burrow. I mean, this is the time to get your Spags. Don't forget that the Chiefs had to go get Spags, right? The Chiefs had to do this opposite Patrick Mahomes. The stability you can have. You can basically be a head coach here. You're playing with a franchise quarterback. You're going to be in the playoffs if you can do any kind of a decent job. That's a great defensive coordinator job. You're going to have continuity and patience from ownership. And granted, you're the moment that you blow out the DC, if you're Zach Taylor, you're now the one on the hot seat, and it's smoking, right? Like next year, no question. If that's what happens, Zach Taylor's seat is the hottest. He has a season where he's on watch, no doubt. But that is a job that you can solidify your career with. I mean, look what's happened for Spags. And I think if you look at it through that lens, I think that there's a lot of really talented defensive coordinators, probably with former head coaching experience, that you could very easily convince to come into Cincinnati and take over that group.
Yeah, and with Livingston, don't forget too. Yes, he worked with Zach, but he wasn't a Zach guy. Zach inherited him, and he was one of those guys that was under contract, and he just kind of rolled over, and it worked out. He was here for a long time, and he was doing a good. I thought he was going to Colorado to be the fall guy. Honestly, I thought that things were going to fall apart in Colorado, and he would be the guy that would be whacked. But so I'm with you, Paul. I don't think it's a dumb question, but I'd be stunned if that's the direction they went. It needs to be a guy with seasons in the league, either as a head coach or as a DC.
I agree.
Well,
Mo, do you have an order waiting for you right now? I don't want to get in the way of your baked goods.
No. I have one more thought on Lou Anarumo. And so here's if this is indeed it, here's what I'll miss. And you guys on game days, you're getting ready to do your jobs and cover the game and stuff like that. We do our show at the Holy Grail, and once a year, Lou Anarumo's buddies from back east all come into town for a game.
Yeah.
And they've often congregated at the Holy Grail. That's a fun group of dudes.
Yeah.
So if Lou's not here next year, I still encourage those guys to come to Cincinnati for a game. That's a fun group of guys.
Yeah. No, and it's the hard part. This is the hard part, and you see this so much this time of year, and you get these are people, man, and they've got families, and and I know this is their jobs, right? And like they're going to get talked about this way. This is part of the job, but it's hard because these are people that, you know, Lou and his persona and him as a person endeared himself to this fan base. Like he became really like someone that everybody was putting their arms around. Lou's their guy, Coach Lou, right? Like the Mahomes killer, and everybody really embraced his personality even, and him as a guy here. But, and so it's hard when you start having to have these conversations, but they know it. This is the life that they live, and that's what the profession is, and you've got to get used to it. But you know, like Lou and his buddies and the concept of the Staten Island Bros, like I've been here for that. That has been an enjoyment, you know what I mean? But
Bengals defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis has a nice ring to it. I'm excited.
Oh, now
that would be something.
I see my lines are lighting up here, Mo. I've got I've got 22 calls on the line, so I got to let you go. Mo, appreciate it, buddy. Enjoy your baked goods.
I will. Thanks for having me, guys.
Have a good one.
See you, Mo.
All right. Much thanks to Mo Egger for joining from a Graders. He's in good hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Graders worthy performance from Mo, despite chaos happening for him, still finding time for us. And hey, second parking lot appearance of the year for Mo. So we need to keep we need to keep a board, Jay, of like all the different places Mo has joined us from. Like, and maybe the beginning of the year, it's put a bet on what will have the most places that he appears from. His basement, parking lots, studio. Like, there's so many different options. I think maybe we need to look into that for the 2025 season.
And then it becomes a thing, and people try to find out where Mo's at, and they're standing behind his car waving, and like on the Today Show where they stand behind the window. I'm always afraid when I do, like, I'll do a radio hit, I'll pull over and do something like, and I'm always afraid someone's gonna knock on the window and panhandle me while I'm trying to do a radio hit. I was kind of expecting that. I could see there was foot traffic going by behind him, there was cars going by behind him.
This is a great idea. Mo has to do every hit from the Graders parking lot, and people start showing up and just standing outside of his car and waving and knocking on the door. If he does it enough, I think that's just going to happen naturally.
Yeah.
Jay. I just think that's just going to be a problem. All right. I do want there's one other thing I want to touch on as we kind of work our way out of the conversation about Lou and the defense and what the path forward is here. As they try to think about, not just obviously now start thinking about next year, or we start thinking about next year while they get to the playing out of the string portion of the program. I just want to drop this on you. You know, people that I talk about it basically every show, I feel like, and that listeners for a long time know, I mean, adjusting net yards per attempt, about as correlative a statistic to winning in the postseason that you will ever find. It is top of the board. And the Bengals this year rank fourth currently in adjusted net yards per attempt. Teams that finish in the top 8 in adjusted net yards per attempt go to the playoffs. That's the group. That is your group of people that could win the Super Bowl every year, basically every year. Unless you get something like last year's Chiefs were a weird one because Mahomes, they struggled during the season offensively, and then all of a sudden they just turned it on down the stretch. But you know, during the second half of the season and in the playoffs, Mahomes was first, second, third, standard Mahomes, top of the league in this stat. Anyway, top 8 this year. Here's who they are. Ravens, who are 7-4, number 1. The Lions are in second. They're 9-1. The Bills are in third. They're 9-2. The Bengals are fourth. They're 4-7. The Packers are fifth. They're 7-3. The Niners, who are another weird team.
Yeah.
They're 6th. They're 5-5. But their passing offense has been. They've had the Bengals and the Niners have some similarities to themselves this year. Commanders 7-4, and the Chargers, who are 7-3. That's your group. And you're in that group. I mean, that's the hard part. The getting into that group those are the championship contenders essentially. And the Chiefs have had their up and down offense, and we'll see how that plays out. They're not there right now, but they're on the edge of it. But when you're in that group, man, they're being 4-7 is just not even. And so I it's always like, okay, because some people yelling about Zach Taylor, and that is a real conversation, and we kind of just hash that out a little bit with Mo in terms of where this likely ends. When your offense is that good, and I know it's Burrow and Higgins and Chase, and so Zach Taylor gets no credit. He is the play caller on offense. I have a hard time blowing out the head coach who's an offensive play caller of a team that is currently a top 5 offense in the league. I mean, right now, their stats, points per drive, 6th, EPA per play, 5th, red zone, 2nd, just net yards per attempt, I mentioned, 4th. Success percentage are 12th. I mean, they're a top 5 offense. And yeah, Burrow deserves a ton of credit for that because he's Joe Burrow. And I know, but I mean, they're building the offense around him. They're calling those plays. They're finding ways to make it work. They're saying, look, Burrow's the thing that's cooking for us. Let's let him throw it. He's thrown it a lot. He wants to throw it a lot. It's working. They're scoring a crap load of points. They lose games because their defense hemorrhages. Like, let's not overcomplicate it. And I think to then say start totally over on everything. I don't know. I get it, and I think these conversations will continue to talk this topic through because it's going to be a big one, understandably, as the year finishes out. But that's kind of if you're trying to simplify it to me, the offense is great, defense stinks. They're losing a bunch of close games. It isn't typically a correlative statistic from year to year. It's something that they've been generally pretty good at. Evan McPherson all of a sudden can't make kicks. Crazy game, this football, right?
Well, I think they get credit too because it's not just been just Burrow. They are finding ways to get Chase Brown more carries and more involved in the run game. They're getting a lot of plays because the defense is giving up scores so fast, and that so that the offense has more time to be on the field. So I think that is part of it, and then also you look at the loss of Eric All still was a big deal on how they were running things. And yeah, he doesn't have great numbers, but that's not what that's about. And to have to kind of pivot where they have the last few weeks and to keep the offense churning, I do think there's a lot of credit there. It's not all just the playmakers. Zach does get some credit there. I know every fan base hates their play caller. They all think they could do a better job. And that's never going to change. But I think that Zach deserves more credit for keeping this offense where it's at, given the fact that it has to be this good for them to have any chance for them to have these kind of one-score games. If this offense slipped at all, we wouldn't be talking about these one-score games. They'd be getting rocked. They'd be getting blown out in these games with the way the defense is playing. So, and I wanted to go back to the adjusted net yards per attempt, maybe for some listeners and for me as well. Because I know obviously yards per attempt, you just take passing yards divided by attempts, and then you get that. I'm just wondering, like, what is it that all goes into the adjusted part of that makes it an even more specific stat than just yards per attempt? It accounts for sack yardage?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that it brings sacks into play too on the basic number. I mean, it's yards per attempt. Plus, you do get some for touchdowns. It has extra emphasis on interceptions. So, the teams that, if you're not throwing picks, you're not turning the ball over, your sack yardage being low or not killing you is also a part of that too. It's just, when you go back through old studies, Michigan Analytics did a long one on this. It's year after year. I've posted this chart before. Year after year, the teams that are in the Final Four are in the top 8. Adjusted net yards per attempt over and over and over and over and over again. And so it's one of those that tends to prove itself out every single year. But yeah, sacks being part of that, emphasis on interceptions, and obviously your standard efficiency metric in the passing game is where that comes from.
Yeah.
All right. Let's what else do we got here? Let's see. Joe Mixon went off again last night. This doesn't help, right? No. I mean, this happens every time your team takes a turn. And really, every time your team's bad. Because this is like, this is an annual rite of passage back in the day for Bengals fans, is like getting mad about your players that leave playing well elsewhere when your team stinks. You don't notice it as much when your team's good. You more notice, you focus more on the guys. Oh, those guys that left, they probably wish they were still here for this, right? I mean, so it's kind of a natural reaction, and that's why we end up talking about Jesse Bates a lot. That's why we end up talking about Joe Mixon a lot. That's why we end up talking about a lot of these guys. DJ Reader, who's enjoying life in Detroit. They're all connected. I mean, there's real connectivity there. I think Bates and Reader specifically, Reader from a culture standpoint and Bates from a culture standpoint. I think people give him enough credit for that side of things too, on top of being a great player. That's notable when you lose that soul of yourself. That said, Mixon's, I mean, it's hard not to. You mentioned Chase Brown, and I do think the Bengals offense has been fine. Chase Brown has been used the way they want to. I mean, you see him out there running routes. I mean, he's catching balls and out in space. And there was an advantage to having Joe Mixon the way that they did. And I don't want to relitigate the Mixon thing, but like he wasn't. This is not who he was last year. And I know F Your Fit is on. Are those on T-shirts yet? Most F Your Fit on He Didn't Fit. But the type of offense that Burrow is best at didn't quite fit what Mixon was best at. And they basically said, let's opt to go with what Burrow is best at and make it work around him. And with the wide zone scheme and pounding the rock that Houston's using, it works, and he's still got it, obviously. He's also very motivated, and I don't know if he had that same level of motivation here. I'm not questioning his play, but he certainly looks like a different player this year.
Yeah, and where the fit comes in is, I mean, it's clear he was not good in pass pro, and they as much as they passed, it was too much of a tell if they're taking him off the field. And then the other thing is where maybe this doesn't work in the Bengals' favor is they kept saying, he gets what's blocked, and that's all he gets, nothing more. The explosiveness is gone. It's back. If you look at explosive runs in the league this year, Mixon is tied for 7th with 15. Chase Brown has 12. Mixon's only played 8 games. If you go,
he has a lot more attempts, though. I mean, how many?
He
more
does have a lot more
Mixon
attempts. Yes,
and almost everybody, right?
Right. Yes. But if you explosive runs per game, he's number 2 in the league behind Jonathan Taylor. So he is. It's not just 4 yards in a cloud of dust, so to speak. He is. He's getting out there and getting after it and trucking people. That was the other thing, is he wasn't breaking tackles, and he's breaking them. He's breaking wills is what he's doing.
Yeah, and that was the advantage of playing that style of football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you do wear people down as the game goes on, and you help your offensive line. Your offensive line loves getting out there and taking the fight to the other side and not feeling they're having to constantly be punched by pass pro. That's the nature of the style they've chosen to play. And so you can question whether that helps you win or not, or what that means for the state of games. They won games playing that style for the most part in 21 and 22 offensively. I mean, they were as pass heavy as anyone then. And again, I don't think you're ever saying less Burrow is good. And again, I don't want to go off on some relitigation of the Joe Mixon situation. The dude's good for him. The Bengals have a top 5 offense. That's good for them. Yeah. I think in some ways it both worked out. It doesn't mean that version of Joe Mixon sure wouldn't look great on 1st and 2nd down in Cincinnati. Okay. Let's get into last week. Run, pass, or boot. How we doing run, pass, or boots last week?
Well, you did really well. I did not do so well. We had it was Chargers, not based, but we based it on Herbert completions, and then the Chargers don't turn the ball over. So one of the other prongs was return yards off of turnovers, and then the Chargers were the number 1 scoring defense in the league, and so Bengals points was one of the prongs. You ran with Bengals points, passed on Herbert completions, and booted turnover return yards, which is exactly how it played out. Bengals had 27 points. Herbert had 17 completions. Combined return yards on turnovers was 6. Geno Stone had a fumble recovery for 6 yards. That was the only turnover in the game. I ran with turnover return yards, so that's a hairy L there. And then I passed on points, and I booted Herbert completions. And crazy, he only had 17 completions in that game, and yet I think 10 were for 20 yards or more.
Yeah. We just did one RPB last week, or do we have two?
Just we just did the one.
All right, Growler Bet. Growler Bet over the weekend. Our Growler Bet was Jamar Chase receiving yards, with T. Higgins back and Jamar coming off 264 against Baltimore. What's it going to look like? I mean, Jamar had a big game, but it wasn't in high volume. The return of T. Higgins had a massive effect on that, but he still obviously had a big game. 75 yards was his number with his 2 touchdowns as well. Have you, by the way, you seen the video from the sideline that the Bengals caught of Jamar talking to Joe about giving him the thumb again? You gave me that thumb again. That thumb. I knew it was all over once you gave me the thumb. And it is pretty. I mean, the backyard nature of those two guys, just a quick thumb, and Jamar knows they're dead in the water the moment he sees it. Is just, that stuff is ridiculous. You know what I mean? That's strictly just two dudes that know exactly. I mean, and another thing Jamar says, and he's like, I don't know how I saw it, because it's true. He's running across damn near the goal line, right? I mean, he's way down the field, the traffic of the linebackers and the line and the DBs, and he looks, and he sees Joe catches his line of sight and just gives him one of these thumbs to go back the other way. I mean, that is just absurd levels of playmaking stuff. And but I loved that. That was awesome. Okay, so 75 was the answer here, though. Higgins going for 148, taking the big numbers. And T, golly, he's having, when he's out there, he looks like a rich man, and he will be. So 75 being the answer, that was a low number. And so a lot of you guys were very high. Of course, a strong number of you came in at 69, as you always do. Congratulations to you there. But not a ton were down around that number. People were thinking a better game for Jamar. Shout out, though, to Guy Bauer. Guy, you were all over this one. You knew where it was going to be. You knew. Came in and you said 74. Oh, so close. But you lose. Sorry about that. But you get the shout out. You get the so close this week. Well done. Good effort. But close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So a couple good submissions, though, from the subject header standpoint. Some good callbacks from last week. One for going to California. Let me welcome everybody to the Wild Growler Bet. Appreciate that. Well done. Any California love you can find, I like. Found myself on the corner of MLK and Crenshaw for the first time this weekend, which was the scene of a lot of my favorite rap songs. Jay, it was cool. On the way, the Trags and I went to LA Memorial Coliseum for USC Nebraska, and it was quite an adventure, to say the least, of trying to get situated in that neighborhood. We ended up parking like a mile and a half away. We walked USC's campus, nice campus. I like the USC campus, but LA Memorial Coliseum is nice for a bucket list, but it's not the nicest facility. How about that?
You broke Trag's rule. Trag's he was going on and on about this in the media room last week. You always park on the property.
Yes.
I guess that's hard to do at that.
No, there was an attempt at one point to bribe the guy who let people on the property, and we did not have a crisp hundy. I think we determined that's what we needed. If we would have had a crisp hundy, that's you can bribe just about anyone with a nice, strong, crisp hundo. Like and almost no matter where. It's hard to say no to. If we would have had that, I think we could have gotten into the green lot. But instead, that guy looked at us like, "You got a crisp hundy?" And we looked at him like, "We don't." We found a spot though. We had to walk a mile and a half. It was a long walk. There was not a lot of good parking around there. Okay, so that said, Kevon Duke, penny for your slots, Growler. We said anybody that makes mistakes gets banished to the Jermaine Burton slot machine on Who Day Light. So penny for your slots. Appreciate that. That was a good one. This one I believe is for you, Jay. Cut my life into pieces. This is my Growler Bet.
I love
that. Well
Yes.
done. And you got me to sing again. This is becoming a concerning trend. Papa Roach shout out. There were a lot of versions of the F word, which is becoming, again, this theme that continues to happen across this year. And it showed up again. T. Higgins with the well-timed F got him some run after the game. This one, of course, from the legend Ray White, came from last week's comment from Joe Burrow. Sometimes it's funny subject headers. Sometimes it's in made-up songs. Sometimes it's throw their beat writers. There's a lot of ways a growl pile can say, hey, get me the effing growler. Well done. Well done.
I was going to say, what I liked about those submissions is people wouldn't actually use the word. Like you're allowed to use that word. I mean, most said it on the podcast. You're allowed to use the actual word in the subject header. Everybody always, Natasha had one where she used the symbols. I mean, people were afraid. I don't know, maybe they're using their work email to send this stuff in and they don't want to have that in the subject header. But I found it amusing where you don't need to edit yourselves for the Growler podcast.
Ray White didn't. He brought the full word. I'm editing him now.
Okay.
I'm trying to limit. We've gotten a little heavy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We like to think ourselves as partially maybe a kid's show as well.
People have told us that they listen with their kids in the car.
Yeah. So we don't need to go super heavy. It's just kind of this year's made a lot of people curse, Jay. It just has. It's made a lot of people curse.
This weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. That said, that covers us there. Arby's? How we doing, Arby's?
So this was really weird. Yesterday, people were asking about, they always ask about chances of flexing in, flexing out. And people were asking me about the Monday night game. Could the Bengals and Cowboys get flexed out? And so I just put a tweet out there for all you guys that are asking. That game cannot be flexed. And the reason why is because they've already done all the drawings and the voiceovers for the Simpsons altcast. And that tweet went crazy. Everybody thought it was hilarious that a game can't be flexed, I guess, because it's the Simpsons. But I thought it makes all the sense in the world where, yeah, they put all this production in. That's why it can't be flexed. But it's got, last I looked, over 600 retweets and tons of likes. It's weird how sometimes those get out there and then some people with a lot of followers were retweeting it. So it gets more head steam. But I just thought it was so odd. But one of my favorite parts was a ton of the replies use Simpson GIFs. And yeah. I enjoyed going through those, especially Dave Ninemitz sent the one of the old man getting hit in the nuts by the Frisbee. That was a great one. But yeah, it's weird how sometimes a simple tweet like that will just catch fire on Twitter or on
air. And sometimes you never know. My best example of that was I was covering the Super Bowl, which is always a possibility just because there's so many eyeballs on it. But I was covering the Super Bowl in the 28-3. So it was 2016, I guess. Patriots come back against the Falcons. And I took a time lapse of the halftime show coming in and coming out. And I didn't think much of it. I just did it to entertain myself. And I posted it. I tweeted it out. And I stopped paying attention to it, right? Went on, covered the Super Bowl, wrote whatever, went to bed. And I woke up and to see that, it had, just engagements in the millions. And I had messages from national news. ABC News was reaching out to me to talk about it. Like there was all these people wanting permission to use it. It was insane. Like I'd never seen anything like it. It was like all of these. And then I had people in my mentions from like China and all these other countries all over the place. I was just like, this is crazy. I have a lot of people replying to me in Chinese. So it just went global. And it's so insane. You never know when something like that's going to happen, especially when you get with the league as it becomes more global. And then the Super Bowl is an example of that. But the Simpsons also quite damn near global. So you got it. I had a message this morning of people asking if I had confirmation of this in our work group. So there you got the people at the Athletic and New York Times wanting to know if I had confirmation of that as news.
Did you have to write something? Do I know?
No, you didn't give me work. I said, yeah, it's been known. I think, again, I didn't think it was a big deal either necessarily. It's just part of, the production. I mean, that's part of production. Like something like that, you have to work well ahead of time to get all that stuff ready. But anyway, okay. For me, I can't get past what happened the other night with the computer. It's just, and we talked a little bit about it in the walkout, but like yesterday was so hysterical from a logistical standpoint where, Sunday night when I come up from the locker room and it was a pretty juicy locker room. I mean, there's a lot going on there. And I'm like, oh boy, ready to go. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I go to type my first sentence, the whole computer just goes to black and just dead on arrival. Like, that's the moment. That's the moment it decides to go out. That felt like did the Bengals hack into my system and shut me down? Like, not now, sir. It was crazy. And so I'm sitting there like, okay, how am I going to do all of this? And eventually you heard us recording. It was late at night. I wrote on my phone for the story. It's up on The Athletic and everything else. But then yesterday, and I thought we had, because a lot of the stuff that I used to edit and format to post the podcast audio was all run off that computer. And so I had to find a way to go in and read. And I thought that I did on my phone. I thought I'd figure out how to do it. I got into the system and I thought I had it formatted correctly. And anyway, I put it in there. Had to do it as a different file than normal, but it was in there. And I was like, let's make sure it works. I hit play on it and I listen. There it is. Says that it's up. I see it with the full time on it. I hit play. I listen to like the first 30 seconds. All right, it's playing. That's good. I hit stop and I go to bed. Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit there at 4 a.m. and listen to the full 30 minutes all over again. Apparently, right after that, it just stopped. And so I don't know how, I don't know why the file corrupted like that, but it did. And so I find that out when I see it in my mentions. By the time I got to my flight, because I get to the airport in the morning, I'm just like trying to get through the day. It's the morning. I barely slept. I had an early morning flight out. I get on my plane. And when I'm on the plane, I get on the Wi-Fi. I'm finally start to go through all my mentions and everything like that and seeing things going on. And then I see, there's a problem with the podcast that it cuts off. Okay. Now I'm on a plane. I have no computer. I have no way to get to these files, and I'm on my phone trying to figure out how to fix this. And I eventually got in touch with somebody who basically was someone who helped me launch the podcast originally. And I was like, hey, any way you can possibly help me. I'm on a plane. I'm on the airplane Wi-Fi. I can't upload. I'm trying to upload the different file formats, but I can't because the plane Wi-Fi is plain Wi-Fi. It's not strong enough. And so I'm trying. I finally got one to sneak through to her, and she was able to go in and she was able to find and replace, but I couldn't get anything to go through. It was sitting there stuck. She was able to go into my system and replace it. And then we got it all fixed within time and got it straight and set up. But I was like, man, you can't, that's an uphill slog right there.
Yes.
Like plain Wi-Fi, no computer that's fried where all your stuff is, and just trying the magic of working through a phone that I just got a new one on Friday that gave me all kinds of problems all weekend. It was a technological just chaos zone. It was insane.
So the screen goes black right as you type your first sentence. What was it? Just a hangdog? Or was there a loud scream, a no?
No, there was, because it had been acting weird.
Yeah.
I knew in the back of my head, like it should have been fine. Like I kind of assumed it would be fine, but there was a little bit piece of me in the back of my head, like that could happen this weekend. Like if that happens, what would I do? And I felt like I'd be fine. I just have to do stuff on my phone, like or whatever. Or the only time it would really be a problem if it happens the moment I start typing after the game. Like that's the worst possible time. Anything else, I'd have time to prepare, get stuff situated, have a backup plan in terms of like, you borrowing something or whatever. That is the moment where it like can't happen. And so for it to come up and as soon as I start going, it's just hysterical. But so it goes. And then I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm like trying to get just reacclimated to myself yesterday. You have to fly all day. I mean, I didn't land until like almost 6 o'clock. The whole day is basically a wash, and just a mess.
So where my mind goes on this is you obviously handled it really well professionally. You don't make a scene in the press box. Who on the Bengals beat would have handled it the worst had that happened to them?
Trags.
That was Trags or Butch?
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My bad.
Which would be throwing things.
I mean, yeah. No, I mean, that's probably almost a given, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's nothing worse though when your technology goes wrong. Bad Wi-Fi, when Wi-Fi starts going out, when your computer starts going haywire, there's nothing more frustrating because it's fine. It feels like everything else is in your control. Maybe going wrong, but it's in your control. When that starts happening, it's like we're in a world that we don't know what we're doing now. Like, and it's just like, somebody help me, please.
Yeah.
Anyone. It happens though. It happens. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, we'll be down at the stadium today getting more stuff from Zach Taylor, Lou Anarumo, Dan Pitcher, and getting us rolling into the bye week. We'll have more content coming for you the rest of the week. And again, we have a live show, Reds live show, that's coming, My Favorite Game with Todd Frazier rewatch of the 2015 Home Run Derby down at BetMGM, Nation Kitchen and Bar at the Banks, 7 o'clock for the panel. For that on Thursday night. Hope to see you down there. It's going to be a real fun night. If you know any friends that are Reds fans, easy for me to say, Reds fans, even if you you are not, let them know. Let them know we're doing this because we think it's going to be a bunch of fun. We'd love to have you down there, and it's going to be a great time. So we'll have plenty more Bengals content coming to you this week and some special shows coming as we lead up and get you through the bye week. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.